I'm Rachel Rigolino, the coordinator of the SWW writing program, part of the composition program here at New Paltz.
Hello, and I'm Nikki Wilson-Clasby. I am the coordinator of the composition program here at SUNY New Paltz.
Hello, I'm Steph Vogler, an undergraduate student and an adolescent education and English major here at SUNY New Paltz.
And I am Lauren Mulvey, an undergraduate student and double major in journalism and digital media production here at SUNY New Paltz.
We're going to take you on a summer-long journey that actually began about 25 years ago here at SUNY New Paltz, where the composition program designed an innovative new program for our developmental writers.
I think it was about 25 years ago, in 1995, that the state of New York decided that four-year campuses could no longer offer remedial education in terms of math and English to students. And we had a non-credit prep writing course at SUNY New Paltz. And we realized that the students enrolled in that non-credit course would not be able to then continue at New Paltz. They would have to take that course at a community college. And we realized that that was not going to work for us. So that led to us redesigning our whole composition program for these students and to create a credit-bearing course with supplemental help assistance in terms of tutoring and an extra workshop hour.
But before we go any further, let's get you situated. We're going to give you a snapshot of SUNY New Paltz.
New Paltz is a comprehensive college in the State University of New York's public university system. Located about 90 miles from New York City in the Hudson Valley, SUNY New Paltz is within easy driving distance of the Mohonk Preserve and Minnewaska State Park, and many students choose to attend New Paltz because of the access they have to outdoor activities. Our campus sits in the plain lying below the Shawangunk mountain ridge, which is considered one of the best rock climbing locations east of the Rockies. The town of New Paltz is a classic small college town that attracts both students and tourists, with many shops and places to eat. One interesting tidbit about the town of New Paltz is that it was founded in the 17th century by Huguenots and boasts having the oldest street in America. Over the past 2 decades, SUNY New Paltz has become increasingly popular and increasingly selective. The Princetown Review ranked SUNY New Paltz as one of the nation's best value colleges and universities, and included it among the top 75 public four-year institutions of higher education in the US. It is now considered one of the best public universities in the Northeast. Although we are now ACT and SAT optional, our current acceptance rate remains selective at 45%. At the same time, SUNY New Paltz remains committed to providing high-quality, affordable education to students from all social and economic backgrounds. To that end, the college works with the Educational Opportunity Program to admit students with promise whose high school GPAs might fall short of admissions standards. This also applies to international students and recent immigrants whose developing English skills put them at a disadvantage when compared with their peers. As you will learn in more detail from this presentation, New Paltz's commitment to its developmental or basic writers was further strengthened in 1996, when the then Director of Composition, Jan Schmidt, worked with Rachel Rigolino and others to design the Supplemental Writing Workshop Composition Program for these students. Then, in the summer of 2021, as you will hear in more detail, we sought to shore up the SWW composition program by finding a way to train graduate peer tutors. But more about that story later.
In 1996, under the direction of Jan Schmidt, we worked on creating this 4-credit course for composition. And in that course, we integrated the embedded tutors that were going to be working both in the classroom and then with the students. So that was a big piece of the puzzle. We called this program the Supplemental Writing Workshop Program because it had an hour of workshop time for the students in addition to the course material, in addition to the 3 hours of the course. there was an hour of workshop time. And then built into that workshop time was an embedded tutor that met with the instructor and the students in class time. And then in addition to that, the students met for an hour outside of class with the tutor. So now we'd like to take you to an interview with Jan Schmidt to get her point of view about how the program got started.
I'm Jan Zlotnick-Schmidt, and I'm a SUNY Distinguished Teaching Professor Emerita. I just retired, but for 20 years I was director of the composition program at SUNY New Paltz from 1985 to 2005. And one of the proudest accomplishments, I think, of the composition program of Rachel Rigolino was the founding of the SWW program, because it helped so many students and built on students' strengths rather than their deficiencies. And they were able to complete the SWW program in Composition 1 and 2 just as regular students did, so they weren't placed in a remedial track. And as I know now, that program is still flourishing and continuing. And it's wonderful after I've retired to see that the program is firmly in place in the composition program. So the reason we started the SWW program was because we got a message from the administration that what they called remedial students were no longer going to be allowed to register in courses at SUNY New Paltz, that they were going to have to go to the community colleges first, take their remedial courses, and then come to SUNY New Paltz. And the issue there was, one, this would obviously affect enrollment and affect some of the programs on campus, but more importantly, it was targeting a group of students and sending them to the community colleges, and we were losing all these gifted students who perhaps could come to New Paltz. So it was kind of a scare, and it really moved us forward to thinking about what would be a better program for students that wasn't remedial but was developmental, that would build on students' strengths and help them accomplish their goals as writers in Composition 1 and 2. And so we wanted to change the model. At that time, the model really was remedial education. And there were sometimes, I think we had in our program before I came, 2 courses that were non-credit courses that preceded Composition 1. And then I think it became 1 course that preceded Composition 1. But they got no credit for it. They did have to pass an exam at the end. And it was demoralizing for students because they felt like they were kind of targeted. They were put in these classes. They were tracked in a particular way. And they didn't have perhaps the same incentives to do well because they felt like, I'm not going to get credit for this course. Why should I work really hard it was like to get out and get into composition. And we wanted to get rid of this sense of deficiency and remediation and build a developmental model that basically said students needed to develop their abilities, but they weren't lacking in abilities. So we were trying to move from a deficiency model to a developmental model. And the plan at the time was that students would take a pre-exam, a summer placement. They would be placed in an SWW course, but that course would be 3 credits, the same credit as composition, but it would have an enhanced hour with the instructor and an in-class tutor who also worked with the instructor both in class, in this extra hour, and then it was the same tutor for tutoring. So we believe that giving students this extra support in areas that they needed, because students may need different areas, there were different areas of writing that they needed, and we could individualize instruction. At the same time, we could give support to all the students, and the extra credit would count towards graduation, the course would count towards graduation. So that was the plan, and it was integrated instruction. Sometimes, we felt that students would be sent by the teacher to the learning center, to the learning center, and the tutor wouldn't know what the teacher was doing. There wasn't that coordination between teacher and tutor. And this way, the tutor was in the class. The tutor could talk with the students, talk with the instructor, find out from the instructor what the student needed. And that integrated approach would really ensure progress for students. And as we found out from the trial run and then the subsequent years, the program worked very well, and students were passing our common final exams and moving on to the next course at the same rate as regular students. And so this enhanced model worked. And in the past couple of years, I've noticed many more schools are moving towards some form of this kind of hybrid model as opposed to a remedial model.
The SWW program was very successful in terms of retention rates and in terms of GPAs of its students in comparison to their peers who were not in the program. And after 20 years, we were feeling very good about the success. However, at that point, in about 2015-16, we lost our federal TRIO grant that had enabled us to pay for the embedded tutors to be in the classroom. And at that point, we lost what we felt was probably the most essential element to the program, having those embedded tutors.
And then COVID hit. And when we saw the numbers of failed students who'd withdrawn, students who'd needed incompletes, we recognized that something had to be done for our SWW students. Luckily, our chair and our dean agreed, and they gave us permission to try out a pilot program that revolved around an idea that our composition assistant, Joanne Diodisibus, had been advocating for years, a training program for our graduate students in tutoring.
Okay, Joanne, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at SUNY New Paltz, and then describe how you came up with the idea to have trained TAs as tutors?
Sure. So I'm Joanne Diodisibus. I'm the composition program assistant, and I'm also an adjunct instructor, and I'm a former teaching assistant myself. In my position, I help to mentor TAs along with the composition program coordinator. And I don't know, a few years ago, I think we realized that we needed to find an economical way to support our students in the SWW program, the Supplemental Writing Workshop Program, because they needed tutoring. And so tutoring has come from, different funding and places over the years, but it just occurred to me that we have the largest teaching assistant program on campus. We oftentimes have 17 TAs teaching composition courses for us every semester. And some of those TAs might appreciate the experience of working one-on-one with students and maybe not jumping right into the classroom at first. So they could just kind of shadow and see what the course was about, see what the instructors were doing, and have the opportunity to support our students who need the extra writing help.
So we had several goals for the project. First, we knew that we would have to create a homegrown site. It couldn't be staffed by professionals or curated. So we decided on using Hawk Sites as our site. Then we also, second, knew that we needed something that could be easily editable. And third, we knew that we would not be paying for professional materials. We did not have a budget. So in essence, we were creating a site that needed to be sustainable over many semesters and years, and that could be amended and changed and updated every semester and throughout a semester.
In the spring of 2021, Rachel and I applied for a SURE grant. That is a student undergraduate research experience. We had already identified 2 undergraduate students who we thought would be fabulous for this kind of project. Both of these students had worked with me in composition a few years earlier.
So, Lauren and Steph, can you tell us about what interested you in the tutor training project?
For me, it was more of an interest in working with the professors and learning more about tutoring in general. I came into the project pretty uncertain about what exactly we were doing, but once we actually began to work on the project, it turned into this whole new opportunity where I was able to work on research skills and create content that felt almost like I was working in a classroom, which was very useful to me, as well as turning into investment in the program itself. It's hard to work on all of this and not care about the students and the tutors that it will then be affecting.
Good.
I think for me, what interested me in the project, I mean, kind of like Steph said, I didn't really know what it would entail at first. But I had been a writing tutor at SUNY New Paltz's Center for Student Success for about 2 years prior to receiving the email from you guys to engage with this research. And I had seen firsthand how students who had engaged with writing tutoring had benefited and grown from it. And I think that there are so many students who come to the Center for Student Success for writing help, but there are a lot who also don't. And I think for the opportunity to have more tutors and more access to tutors for as many people in the SUNY New Paltz population as possible is a great opportunity, and to be able to be part of the research project that would be expanding that and offering those opportunities to the student body was awesome for me. I think that writing is such an important tool for students, for faculty, for everyone involved. So for students to have the opportunity to hone those skills was really the drive for me, I think.
You said that you didn't quite grasp what the project was about, and so why do you think that was? It just because it was something new, or, I mean, the way we kind of presented it to you, it seems...
Well, I think that kind of speaks to the fact that Lauren and I weren't part of the SWW program.
True.
We didn't participate in the EOP program because we weren't eligible for things like that. In that sense, we came from a privileged writing background in which we had resources in our high schools to help build our skills, and so we didn't really have the context to know what role the SWW program had in the classroom. I don't know about Lauren, but when I came into SUNY New Paltz, I just skipped over the composition classes because I had already taken APs for that. So it was just a whole new world for me.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
Lauren, you too?
Yeah, actually the same thing. I wasn't even really aware of what the SWW composition program was. I knew of the composition program, and I had taken a composition class with Nikki when I came in, Comp 2, and that's how I had met her, and you also met her from taking a course with her. But I had no idea what the project would really entail. All I knew was that you guys were training new writing tutors. I was a writing tutor, and that's kind of what I had to offer to the project. Other than that, I was just hoping to kind of see how the project would progress as we went.
So, and here's a question to you that we didn't prepare for at all. So we'll see how this goes. So in thinking about the tutoring and this idea of being a peer tutor, and you were a peer tutor, Lauren, but coming in as such strong writers, and Steph used the word privilege, did you think of yourself as a peer? Like when you're in the tutoring center, how do you become a peer to someone whose writing skill is not as sophisticated as yours? How do you...
Right. I think it's really just about relating to the student in ways that you can when they arrive. For me, it was speaking to the student as if they were a friend of mine who was asking for help with a paper, and really putting yourself on the same level with them, because that's what you are, you're peers, you're on the same level. You just come from different academic backgrounds and different experiences with writing, and that doesn't, make you really any different. You could know a lot about writing and they could know a lot about philosophy or a lot about psychology. Yeah. And I actually found that I learned so much from the students that I had ended up tutoring, just from talking to them, and found that they knew a lot more than I did on many, many different subjects. So I think that recognizing that as a peer tutor and being able to put yourself on that level with them right when they walk in the door is how I was able to do that. And it wasn't difficult at all. Everyone was so intelligent and kind and sociable, so yeah.
And did you have that concept of, train these tutors to work with a group of students, again, whose writing skills were less sophisticated as yours? Like, speaking to you as a teacher, how did that all, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I completely agree in that it's all about putting yourself on the same level. There's in most cases, you're of a similar age, you're
Right.
probably coming from the same generation, you have the same frame of reference for a lot of things that's very different to how your professors or people younger than you might see things. And so that's obviously a different relationship than you'll get in teaching, and it's one of those things that I think about. I'm in college now and I'm thinking about teaching as someone who's somewhere in between teenager and adult, young adult, shall we say. And I think about how I'm going to lose that perspective eventually. I'm going to forget
Right.
what it was like to sit in that classroom for 7 hours straight and have to do the work night after night, rather than a different mode of learning in college. So in that sense, peer tutoring becomes very essential because it's just coming from totally different perspectives on the issue.
The focus of your academics. So tell us again, what is your major?
I'm an adolescent education and English major, so I hope to be an English teacher. I want to work with high schoolers and hopefully bring a new perspective to education in that way. And Lauren, on the other hand?
I am a double major in journalism and digital media production. So one day I hope to possibly be some sort of digital journalist, visual journalist. I think that writing has always been an important part of my academic career, so becoming a writing tutor and adding journalism as one of my majors was always intended to include that in my studies.
This site was designed to be an interactive training site for 2 TAs who we had got permission from the Dean to participate in this online program. Both of these TAs would work as embedded tutors within the SWW classes.
So Nikki, what feedback have you had from the tutors who are using the site now?
I currently have 3 TAs working with the tutor training site right now. 2 of them are from the composition program, and 1 is from the education program who is doing a field study credit for the graphic design department who need help for their thesis students. But the 2 TAs that I have from composition are really enjoying the site right now. They find the materials really, really clear to navigate, to understand. They're incredibly helpful, and they really enjoy engaging with the blog side and writing down their ideas. So far it's so good. I'm getting very, very good feedback from them in terms of the layout, the ease of navigation, the types of materials that we've selected for them to use. And although they're only sort of at sort of unit 2 right now, the feedback has been really positive, and it's really helped them, because it's very difficult for TAs to go from teaching composition, being a teacher in the classroom, to shift to becoming a tutor, because they're completely different skills. So the materials that you've provided up front have really helped them make that transition, and that's super important.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome Maddie Oderkirk to this interview session. She's going to talk to us today about her experiences on our new pilot peer tutoring program. So welcome, Maddie. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks. So my name is Maddie Oderkirk. I've been a part of the TA program in general for going on 2 years now. This will be my last year in the program in general. My first year and a half, I was actually a TA and did 2 semesters teaching English 170 and 1 semester teaching English 160. And now this is my, like Nikki said, my first semester as a tutor. About halfway through the semester now, which I was just telling Nikki has been, it's kind of crazy that it's felt like it's flown by. But as far as the way that the website has kind of worked for me, it's really, really helpful in almost all categories that I've been doing the test, although I kind of went through most of them nearer to the beginning, because at first I was like sectioning them out by week, and it just was something that I was realizing I wanted the information as I was going rather than, week by week until the end of the semester. And for the most part, it's really been helpful. There's always been a couple questions that I've spoken to Nikki about, but they were questions that were easily able to speak to somebody else about outside of the website itself. So I'm actually really grateful that we have the website. The blog section has been a little bit more difficult for me, not in that it's completely hard to reflect on some of what it is, but it takes up more time than I would originally thought that it would. And so I've now done them all, and as I do them, I save them on a Google Doc, and I'm just trying to kind of keep up with them when I can. So that's been a little bit more I don't want to say difficult, again, as though it's something that's hard to reflect on. But I guess a lot of the reflection that I'm coming across while looking at the blog post is also reflection that I'm really doing during the sessions, if not after the sessions, when I'm kind of sitting waiting for the next session, or the end of my day has kind of come and I've had a bunch of the tutoring sessions in a row. And so I find myself trying to pull in what I reflected on in previous actual sessions. And it's a little bit more difficult than I would have thought. I wish that I had in the beginning kind of done some of these blog prompts if I had to give advice to somebody else right after some sessions, because I think that they're just innately entwined, of course. But as a whole, the SUNY program has been really great. I've loved working a little bit more closely with the EOP students and it as a program. It is frustrating at sometimes. Going from even just teaching into tutoring has been a little bit of a struggle, but also just what tutoring is as a whole. I think it's much more difficult. We should give a lot more credit to tutors. And yeah, it's been a good experience, and although frustrating at times, it's actually been a really good side if I ever think about teaching in the future again, because it's actually really helped me be able to find different ways to connect with students on a deeper level, which has been by far the best part of the experience. It's really great to be able to talk to students one-on-one and have a connection with them and their work in a way that I didn't really get to do before. So that's been a really, really lovely part of this experience. And as far as any of the kind of frustrations, they're definitely outweighed by being able to kind of connect in teaching in the way that that I originally signed up for teaching, which is why I've kind of loved it. So this has been a really good kind of combination of the things that I liked about teaching and being able to take a step back from being a teacher to see what another end of it is like. So.
All right. Thank you, Maddie. That's wonderful.
Thanks, Nikki.
So Ashley, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work as an SWW tutor?
Sure. So hello, my name is Ashley Rose. I'm currently an English graduate student at SUNY New Paltz. I'm part of the master's program. I decided to sign up for the TU program and the SWW tutoring pilot because I'm very passionate about academia. I've always been very passionate about teaching and writing and literature, and I figured that this would be a really good way to gain experience with teaching and helping other students. Writing is one of my strong points, and I feel like if I have a good grasp of it, my professors are telling me that I have a good grasp of it, then maybe I can use that and I can help other students who may be struggling. And, oh, do you want me to read off or?
Go
Okay.
ahead, yes.
Now that we are halfway through the semester, what thoughts do you have about the material that has been compiled on the website? Has it been helpful? I think that the composition program website is an incredibly helpful resource, especially to those who are going to be tutoring or even teaching for the first time. I know that it was very helpful for me as somebody who is tutoring for the first time. I especially really liked hearing the short interviews from different faculty and staff who have done tutoring or teaching. They're seasoned, they know how to do it. I thought it was very helpful just to hear from another person different situations that they've been in and what's worked for them, what hasn't worked. And I can attest that some of the articles have helped too, especially like with ESL students or ELL students. That was something I was a little nervous about because if I don't know their language, I'm not confident in, helping them. But the articles did really help a lot in preparing me to work with some of these students, and they've responded very positively to some of the things that I've tried to help them figure out how to become better writers. When it comes to the blog section, what observations do you have about taking a few minutes to reflect on the writing prompts? So I think with the blogs, they were great. I think that they are helpful because it kind of forces us to slow down and really think about, okay, well, if I was in this situation, how would I respond to the students? How would I feel? So I think that was great. It really forced me to slow down and really think. And it did actually help me prepare because I did have a couple of situations similar to the blogs. So it helped me think through. And then when I was actually in the situation, I had more of a way to figure out how do I navigate this and how do I, yeah. So those were helpful. The only thing I will say about the blogs is that it can be a little, it can be hard to relate to, especially when we bring in theory. I think that the learning theories are good and they're good to be mindful of, especially if you have a student who's more of a visual learner or maybe they learn better just by hearing something. I think that is helpful, but I think it's also kind of difficult because as a graduate student, as somebody who's taking time to do the tutoring, that takes time. I also have other responsibilities. I have another job. It can be a little hard to go through each blog and sit and actually, because I want to do well on the blogs and I want to make sure that if somebody else is reading the blog and they're looking for my input, I want to make sure that I'm giving something that's valuable and it's actually helpful, but it can be a little tedious because I don't think of my students in terms of like the whole VARC theory. I just know that if a student responds one way, then and it's a positive response if they're understanding what I'm telling them, or if they're not and I'm asking them, well, how do you learn? It's easier just to talk it through like that and just to think in terms of, well, how did you score on VARC? The blogs can be a little tedious in that sense, but for the most part, they can be helpful to reflect and whatnot. Finally, what has your experience been like so far as a tutor for the SWW program? I'm very happy to report that so far my experience has been very pleasant. I cannot think of a bad experience that I've had so far. You do have students who are not happy to be in tutoring, and that's with anything. There are students that are not happy to be in certain classes. that's just how it goes. But for the most part, I have really wonderful students, and I have a very wonderful mentor, Professor Peggy Hack. She has been extremely wonderful. And I feel like I'm learning so much from her, and I'm learning so much from my students. And it's very rewarding when, after I've had like a series of long tutoring sessions, when I have that one student who maybe hangs out afterwards and they say, you know, thank you so much for helping me. Like, this has been very, very helpful. Like, I feel like I'm getting the material. I feel like I'm doing better. And it's very rewarding too when you have students, especially ESL students, who maybe their writing wasn't that great before, or maybe they were struggling a lot, and then all of a sudden you're reading their works and they're making like huge improvements, and you can tell that they're feeling more confident. They feel like they've got it, and it's reflecting. Like, it's been very rewarding. So I would say that the SWW program has been a very good experience, and I think it's been very good for some of the students too. It's been very helpful for them.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for being willing to be interviewed, and have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, so when you're putting the site together, do you think, the site is meant to train tutors who are graduate students who are about your age. So they're peers too, in a sense, to the students who are they're a few years older, but essentially the same generation. Were you conscious at all sometimes of choosing elements to put into the site that would appeal to someone your age, or appear like it, working with it? Like, were you conscious at all of that? I don't know.
I definitely was. I found myself putting into the site content that I found most engaging and most interesting. And having gone through tutoring training myself, I knew what I responded to well and what I didn't respond to well. And obviously the tutors who will be using our site are grad students, and they have a lot of work on their plate already. So we didn't want to make that harder for them, and we were all very mindful of that. I think that...
We hope.
Yes, we hope. We'll see. To have content on the site that that was easy to understand, that was easy to consume for the grad students, was very present in my mind as I was putting my parts of the site together. I used a lot of videos. I liked to incorporate more visuals and kind of things that felt more like a break than like a very long academic article that undoubtedly has very important information, but that we could maybe find another way to explain, or a way to isolate that information so that it would be easier and more compact for the grad students who would be viewing the site. So it was definitely something I was really mindful of as someone who has gone through the training, and as someone who is part of a younger generation myself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When I was putting it together, I was thinking in terms of the type of content that I prefer to learn from, which is interesting because in many of my classes now, I'm learning about how you sort of need to decenter your own experience from how you learn and how you're presenting content. But at the same time, I do feel that a few general principles hold true. If possible, summarize the academic article. The grad students don't have time to read all of that. Find videos, visuals, break up the large bodies of text with something that's more easy to consume, like a podcast, which Lauren worked very hard on.
The final product of our research is this comprehensive Hawk site with a wealth of information pulled from various experts in the school's composition, English, and tutoring programs, open educational resources online, and from our own experiences as writers, writing tutors, and our mentors' experiences as composition instructors. Our site presents multimodal modules or units for tutor training covering everything from fundamentals of policy and tutoring ground rules to techniques for working with a diverse group of learners to confronting obstacles and troubleshooting while working with students. Each unit includes subunits. These subunits are comprised of videos, text, pulled quotes, academic articles, and podcasts from expert composition program instructors, professional tutors, and even peer advisors here at SUNY New Paltz. These perspectives give our site unique insight into the program in which these tutors will be working. In fact, the podcasts became one of our favorite modes of presenting information on the site. Made by myself with the help of 6 experienced instructors and tutors, ESL experts, and even the former coordinator of the Center for Student Success, the podcasts provide first-hand experiences of tutoring and working with developing writers. Here are some of our favorite sound bites from the podcast series.
Hi, this is David Alfieri.
Hi, my name's Jessica Delaney.
Professor Joan Parise.
My name is Peggy Hack.
My name is Faiza Tassin.
This is Penny Friel. I was a full-time instructor.
Adjunct instructor.
Coordinator of the Center for Student Success.
Composition instructor and an EOP tutor.
Adjunct for the English Composition Department.
The writing tutor and a peer advisor.
So here's some tips on being an active, sympathetic audience and a helpful peer.
Cultivate a collaborative environment.
Tutors should be supportive of the instructor.
Role model what you want to get from the student. Be approachable, be accessible.
By helping them highlight their academic strengths.
Let it be casual. Be warm and curious.
Also be creative in ideas for brainstorming help.
First, practice the art of being patient. What is important is you try to make the most of the time allotted.
When this happens, it can be a beautiful thing.
We would like to extend our thanks to everyone who participated in adding this crucial element to our site, which has made it all the more informative and engaging. Beyond the podcasts, though, we also created original content for the site based off our research, often to introduce resources we were providing or summarize concepts or resources that were too lengthy. In general, we tried to make sure that each of the 10 units was 1 to 2 hours of work, as the tutor training is in addition to the full schedules of the grad students involved. Each of our 10 units is accompanied by an internal reflection unit called Wrap Up. These mini units are meant to incite reflection, understanding, and application of the themes covered in each unit. Each Wrap Up mini unit includes a blog created by our supervisors. Professor Rigolino put together scenarios the tutors could explore through the Articulate 360 software. Scenarios are traditionally a large part of tutor training, but are much harder to replicate in an asynchronous setting like our module. So this was Professor Rigolino's solution. Professor Clasby, on the other hand, created blog responses for most of the units to help students reflect on the content they learned. We also curated a collection of further resources we had gathered that were not included in our module for any number of reasons, such as brevity, the extreme specificity of the article, or its redundancy, but that we still felt were potentially valuable to the tutors. This can be found in our Resources tab. Let's say you were looking for more information on how to deal with plagiarism when you're tutoring. You can find it right here. Now, maybe you're wondering what Steph and I have to do with any of this research. Steph, an adolescent education major for English, and I, a journalism major and writing tutor at the Center for Student Success, have both taken immense learnings from this experience. Let's hear what Steph has learned.
Aside from learning about tutoring in far more depth than I otherwise would have, this project also showed me the power of a community coming together to find funding where there previously wasn't any, and working to create resources for the future. Almost everyone we asked for help along the way helped us to put together this website, and that was incredibly meaningful to me. Furthermore, working on this project changed the way I thought about research, turning it from something tedious into something that could be very fulfilling. It helped me grow more confident in my research skills and learn new skills, as well as introduced me to the teacher's side of the story when putting together content for classes. As an adolescent education major, this was very useful to me. While teaching and tutoring are different, the information I learned through working on this project introduced me to areas of teaching I previously knew nothing about and expanded my thinking.
As a writing tutor at the campus's Center for Student Success, the biggest takeaways for me presently are what I can bring to all my future students here on campus. From the extensive research on tutoring methods, techniques, and general tutoring theory, I have gained and reinforced my knowledge on tutoring more than ever before. With this, along with my prior experience as a tutor, I feel I am not only better equipped to help students with writing, but better equipped to help students in general. And looking forward, the research, editing, and web building skills I have developed through this project will allow me to pursue a career in digital journalism with more experience and ease than I had back in May before this all started. And of course, as Steph has said, in a time of chaos in the world, it has been enlightening and awe-inspiring to see the SUNY New Paltz community unite to help students strengthen their writing skills, a tool that is truly imperative to a successful future. What's next, you may ask? Well, we currently have 2 grad students using our tutoring site as we speak. These students are working as embedded tutors for their first semester ever in the SWW Comp program, and they're learning as they go. As far as the effectiveness of the site, we are working with these tutors to comprehend what from the site works and what doesn't. And as education and writing are ever-changing landscapes, we hope that our site will evolve throughout the years to better accommodate students and tutors to come.
Well, and that brings me to the question we were going to get to was, now, in terms of building out this site, what would you say was kind of the more challenging aspects of that for you guys?
For me, I think the most difficult part of building out the site was probably figuring out what to include in the site to begin with. I think the beginning stages of our research was exactly that. It was just a lot of research, a lot of pulling different articles from different sources, and we combed through a lot of different information and material from a lot of different places, from online, from resources at the school, the Center for Student Success, from instructors in the composition program. So we had a lot that we could include. I think combing through that and figuring out what was the most important to include in the site was probably one of the hardest parts. And then, prioritizing. And we ended up having on our site a resources tab that has a bunch of extra resources that we didn't include in the main units throughout the site. So I think that in that way you can see how much research we really did and put into every single topic that you see on the site.
I think we spent, how many weeks did we spend just looking at research?
Many, like
it was at least 3, maybe 4.
Yeah.
Collecting
a lot of
all
weeks.
the information. And we had the CRLA handbook. We all had a print copy of that. So that was, what we kind of began with.
Yeah, and that was always so interesting to pull from because it had a lot of interesting perspective, but in some cases a lot of the places it referenced were dated. So it was interesting to pull from so many different resources because you have things from the Center for Student Success, which are in many ways a lot more contemporary because they're being constantly updated. And you also have resources from the Orange County Community College, and just all sorts of syllabi from many different colleges. And even when you couldn't necessarily find a syllabus that had all the topics that they covered, you could maybe look at a textbook that they mentioned in it. And that was sort of dated as well in many cases, but it was interesting to see the different things that were important, not only in different eras, but for different communities. And to continue from what you were saying about the hardest part about working on the site, I wouldn't say a specific part of the site. I would say more the hardest part was working on things digitally, and not necessarily being able to have long conversations in person and just perhaps be working side by side and be able to lean over and say how.
And I'm going to interrupt you. Can you explain how the four of us work together? That's a great thing we haven't explored. How did we manage to do this?
Right, so the beginning of this project was all done over email. We communicated over email. We wrote our grant proposal through like Google Docs, I believe it was, or some sort of
a little bit of
document.
Zooming in the middle there, but it was our communication with the professors was mainly all through email.
Yep. Then we continued to see through the project all digitally, online, using WebEx. All of our meetings were weekly, online for about an hour or so. Or
sometimes up to 2 hours. It really depended on the week. There was a lot to cover.
And sometimes there were 2 meetings a week at the end there.
Yeah.
That was getting crazy at the end.
Yeah, so all of that was done either through WebEx or through email, and all other progress that we kind of made with the site, we kind of just saw as we looked at the site. So
it was very independent. You know, it was all coming to conclusions and making decisions and then going off and just working on things all on our own separate veins.
Right.
It was a lot of divide and conquer, not let's work together on this one bit.
Exactly.
But now, would you say, and I'm agreeing with you, that's the way I perceived it too, but would you say though that communication was important though, the regular staying in touch communication?
Absolutely.
That we had,
I think it was essential to the success of the project. Even though some weeks, like we all were doing our own different parts of the site and dividing and conquering different tasks, it was really important to come back together and check up on each other, ask each other what we needed, and I think that that's kind of how we figured out the most important parts of the site, and how we kind of all met in one place and were able to create a cohesive look for the site, a cohesive tone for the site. Without that, I think that, you know, we all have individual ways of writing, ways of taking in and putting out information. So I think without that, we would probably have, you know, varying,
we would have 4 separate sites within one site.
Exactly. Yep.
It's amazing the work that actually the writing is pretty good. I mean, it all holds together. It doesn't
feel like a huge variation in tone is happening, which I was very happy with, because that's one of the things I was most scared of happening, especially since at the beginning we were all putting together pages with completely different styles. You know, one of us would use one kind of heading, another would use a different kind of heading. We would indicate how things should be done in completely different ways, which is why turning everything into one cohesive style was a huge project at the end. But at the same time, it was just such an important piece of that.
Right.
I also think that the fact that we were working independently did allow for some more innovation, though, because instead of working next to each other and being like, how are you doing that? Oh, I'm going to do it that way. Oh, how are you doing that? Oh, I'm going to do it that way. We each sort of developed our own separate styles, and then, you know, I would borrow an idea from Lauren, you know, add a few more videos, or maybe I came up with the idea of, you know, pulling important quotes from articles, and that ended up being something that other people would use. So as much as the independence made things difficult in a lot of cases, I think it was also useful in other ways.
Right. I was actually just going to say that Steph and I ended up working on different parts of the site in different units, but we really collaborated on ideas of how to present information. I think I would end up going and looking at what Steph was working on, and then I'd be like, oh, she put some full quotes in there. So I went back and I put them in my units. And vice versa. Steph would go and look at my units, and I had put exercises in my units, so optional scenarios that the tutors viewing the site could read and imagine how they would deal with that tutoring scenario. So then Steph was like, love that idea, I'll go put it in my site. And I just remember there were days where we were texting back and forth like, I love that you did this, and I'm going to put it in all my units. So it was really a great collaborative effort.
You don't have to say, Joe. You can say whatever you want, actually.
I want to read your exact script because it's a masterpiece and I'm going to do it justice. Anyway.
journey. So am I talking to this camera now? This one, camera one, or this one?
So, yeah, you can do yeah, I think this one's good now.
Okay. We're going to take you on a summer-long journey that actually began 25 years ago when our university, the State University of New York at New Paltz, designed an innovative writing program for our supplemental writers, and that was really bad because I was not looking at the camera at all. So can I do that again?
Yeah, just do again. Just say whatever you want.
Funny how we're both automatically going for this position.
Yeah. I feel like I do talk with my hands a lot though, so I do. It would be hard for me to just be like, hello. Mom.
3 p.m. on Wednesday is the slot.
That's nice, that's nice. See, that's what's good about living at home now. Talk to Mom every day.
Okay, all right. In the spring of 2021, Rachel and I applied for a SURE grant, which is a In the spring of 21, Rachel and I applied for a SURE grant, which is a
Summer undergraduate. You can do this.
Oh, that's right.
Summer undergraduate research.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Okay.
What does the E stand for?
Right. Which camera are we going to? This one? This one.
Well,
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Rachel, which one were you looking
I was
at?
looking at that one.
That one?
Yeah.
It's very difficult for TAs to go from teaching composition, being a teacher in the classroom, to shift to becoming a tutor because they're completely different skills. So the materials that you've provided up front have really helped them make that transition, and that's super important.
It's a wrap.
Okay. Okay.
Awesome.
Did you get anything out of that you can use?
That was great. That's awesome to hear.